Who doesn't?
It's the best TV.
It's part of the reason I can't work on Sundays. All right, so I think we are redirecting to Facebook. Here we go. See. Yep, we're on. Okay, cool.
It's
mute you on layer.
the best TV.
All right, cool. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome back to Ask a Scientist. Again, we apologize for the weirdness that happened last week. We're hoping to avoid that this week. Today with us, we have Mohsin Kazmi. I said your last name right, I think, who is a kind of a jack of all trades. So today he's gonna be talking with us about conservation photography. But I've actually had the pleasure of working with Mohsin briefly in Peru, and he does amazing work at his biodiversity station with his nonprofit Jungle Keepers, and lots of other really cool stuff that we have attached in our newsletter, and I will be posting later on our Asheville Museum of Science Facebook page if you guys are interested to check out some more of the work he does. So Mohsin, I'm going to hand it over to you and you can just take it away. And everyone that is watching, please feel free to send in your questions at any time and I will pass them along to Mohsin.
All right, well, thanks, Abby. I really do appreciate it. So today I'm going to be talking about conservation photography and the different aspects of the field and how to get into it if you're interested, and perhaps maybe doing some conservation photography at home. So I'm just going to share my screen here and start a presentation. And then feel free to ask me questions and I will answer them as soon as I can whenever I see them. Conservation photography. I have been doing this as a photographer for probably 15 years now. And that kind of started when I was 9 years old. So if you want to talk about conservation, it doesn't really matter what age you start at. It's just the fact that you got to start. Now I'm having a little trouble with my, here we go. All right. So a little bit about me. I grew up in New Jersey. I had some woods in my backyard and my mom gave me a camera and I just started going and taking pictures of the things that were around me. So leaves, plants, bugs. I really wanted to be a wildlife photographer. And then I found myself in Peru back in 2010. And I realized that there was a lot of stories to be told in the jungle that maybe allowed me to advocate for an area that doesn't really have its lenses on it as often as we would like. So over the last 10 years, I've been traveling through rainforest ecosystems and documenting different stories and elements that kind of help advocate for rainforest conservation and biodiversity conservation. It's been a very interesting road. I can definitely tell you it was a lot of winging it and faking it till you make it, but I've really enjoyed it. So let's see here. Let's go to the next slide and hope it works. There we go. So this is one of my favorite quotes. If I could tell a story in words, I wouldn't need to lug around a camera. And Lewis Hine said that. Lewis Hine was a photographer that documented a lot of the child labor injustices that were happening in the early 1900s. His photographs actually helped bring attention to lawmakers about what was going on in these places. And it actually ended up helping legislation to create child labor laws. So to me, photojournalistic photography, conservation photography have the power to change the world. It's allowing people a window into a place that they've never seen before. And Lewis Hine is a great example of that. So let's go through a couple other photographs that have contributed to the way people view things in big ways. So this is Migrant Mother by Dorothea Lange. And this was a picture that was taken during the Dust Bowl. And the Dust Bowl basically was this horrible event that happened during the Depression that caused people to live in poverty. There was no food available. And someone went out there with a camera and took pictures and brought this really captivating image of a concerned mother and her children in the Dust Bowl. And it's moved. It's a picture that people have really been moved by for a long time, and it once again brought attention to that. Abby, if you are sending me questions, let me know. I can see you in the feed, but I'm not sure if the screen share will work there. So, okay, Tank Man. Tank Man happened in 1989. Jeff Widener took this picture. A lot of people have seen this. Musicians have used this to demonstrate certain ideals that they might have about, fighting against the establishment. It was taken in Tiananmen Square in China during the Communist Revolution. This picture gives me goosebumps. It says a lot of things about standing, in the way of oppression as one man. No one knows what happened to this man, but it is a picture that people genuinely refer to when they talk about revolution and change in many ways. And then, of course, there's Afghan Girl by Steve McCurry, a picture that also happened to be during communism in Afghanistan, of this very beautiful, simple woman from a tribe in Afghanistan. Her eyes are absolutely mesmerizing. And it's pictures like this that brought people's mindset on the country Afghanistan. No one really knew about it back then. And then, you learn about the opium trade, you learn about communism, you learn about America's relationship with that. And once again, a picture did that. A picture brought attention to how people view the world. So, most of these types of things are, photojournalistically speaking, have a lot to do with like socio-political issues and things that involve humans. And what I find conservation photography to be is a combination of socio-political, environmental, and documentary photography. It's a little bit harder to justify to someone the importance of an animal over a person. And I think that's the main challenge that we face as conservation photographers. This is a good one. You've got to push yourself harder. You've got to start looking for pictures nobody else could take. You've got to take the tools you have and probe deeper. When people ask me what kind of camera do you have, or what kind of gear do you have, my statement is the best camera you have is the one that you have, right? If you go and you're in a place and you really want to shoot it wide because that's going to take it to the next level, and all you've got is a narrow frame. Guess what? All you've got is a narrow frame. So it's more of a responsibility for photographers to just go take pictures, and not look for perfection, and really rely on their knowledge of the camera and the skills to get what they can with what they have. So you don't need an expensive camera. You don't need a ton of lenses. You just need a camera and a desire to have your opinion known, perhaps. So let's take it into conservation. I think that's why a lot of people are here. I work in the Peruvian Amazon. I've been doing it for 10 years. I started when I was 21 years old. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know what life was about, but I knew that every time I went to the jungle, I heard chainsaws, and I heard, I saw fires. I saw every year that I'd come back, things were disappearing. I cannot emphasize enough how much we lose every year to biodiversity loss. And I'll talk about kind of what those factors are as we go through this. But the most important thing to know is the Amazon is disappearing. This is an example of slash and burn agriculture. I took this picture in 2015, and then last year during the Amazon fires, it really blew up. I see it kind of all over the place as an example of what destruction looks like. And to take this picture, I had to go climb a tower and look for smoke because I knew there was burning going on that season. And I generally figured out where the smoke was coming from. I rode a motorcycle to some stranger's farm and I said, can I take pictures here? And the guy said, yes. I have no idea why you need to take pictures here, but go ahead and do it. And I inhaled a bunch of smoke and jumped over a bunch of flames, and I got as many pictures as I could. And I think that's what it takes to do photojournalistic photography. Knowing that nobody really is going to care until you find the right platform for it. And I waited 6 years and the platform was there. People are saying, well, where's your proof for the Amazon fires? And it's because of conservation photographers that you get the proof. You got to take these pictures like you know the future is going to happen. And sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't. But this is a really good example of that. So here's the river we work on. It's the Las Piedras River. It's, as you can see, there are 3 national parks all around the Las Piedras River, but the Las Piedras itself is not protected. So what we find ourselves doing here is trying to maintain this corridor amidst all these parks, so that people don't extract illegal timber and different elements out of the jungle and use the Piedras as a highway. The reason this river is so important is because, one, there are uncontacted tribes on this river. That means that there are people on this river that have never, ever experienced Hannah Montana or what a wheel is that's made out of rubber. They don't get me started on a car. Like, these people have been living in the jungle since humanity. And that is something that is dwindling these days too. In a way, they are an endangered group of people because of our way of life is threatening their way of life. And I think the more you can focus on having photography be directed towards an anthropocentric view, or a view that's through a human lens, the more you can garner some trust. So let's see here, I got a question. So in the 10 years that I've been working on in the Amazon, and this is a question from Kinsey, has the rate of destruction increased or decreased? The rate of destruction has most definitely increased. There was a 2-year span of time where it actually plateaued and it leveled off, and we felt like we were reaching some sort of equilibrium where, you know, people weren't harvesting. But since probably Bolsonaro came into office and the Peruvian government has been kind of working with them, there's been a lot of deforestation, and that's actually has been attributing the fires. It's been a big problem. We have 20,000 acres that we maintain through our nonprofit Jungle Keepers, and we have our own rangers protecting our land, but they've been submitting reports saying that since COVID-19 started, there have been more loggers in the jungle. There have been more people harvesting and extracting because there's no tourism industry that's kind of coming in and out and deterring people from going in. Right now, it's like the Walmart has nobody working in it and the doors are open. So there are people coming in unregulated and harvesting and extracting timber at a rate that's far beyond the rate that happened last year and the last 3 years before that. So that's the answer to that question. Let's see here. So in addition to having uncontacted tribes, you also have one of the most biodiverse hotspots in the world. This is a heat map that kind of explains biodiversity. The darker colors like red means super biodiverse. And then as you get lighter and cooler, there's less biodiversity. Look at where we are in the Southern Appalachians. Like, even our area is biodiverse compared to many other places. And that's something to be proud of and something to keep in mind when you're talking about conservation photography. But if you look at Peru, I mean, it is blood red. And that is something that means, I always tell people there are more heartbeats in that area than anywhere else on earth, right? And if you consider it like heartbeats and you consider it from an evolutionary scale, like, there are thousands and thousands of living things there that have earned their keep over millions, and to just destroy it without advocating for it or just having a discussion is something that I'm viscerally unable to do. And that's why I do what I do. I'm seeing another question. So let's see here. How does the biodiversity of the Amazon compare to somewhere like North Carolina? Great question. And I kind of answered that a little bit before, but I I love talking about the biodiversity in our backyard. So I live about 2 hours north of you guys, in Abingdon, Virginia, and Southwest Virginia. And pretty much from there down to Asheville has more amphibian species, I believe, more freshwater fish species. There's a big mussel population in our area, which is dwindling. But we have so much surface area where we live, with the mountains and the rivers and the creeks, that it's able to sustain so much life. In summer, the Southern Appalachians actually have a subtropical climate, which, if you think about, is perfectly productive for sustaining biodiversity. But when you compare it to the Amazon, it's like this much versus this much, right? It's like a gallon of water compared to a pipette of water. Biodiversity is meant to be protected wherever we live, and we should be thankful for what we have rather than jealous. But if you can get down to the Amazon at some point, I highly recommend it. So let's talk about threats to biodiversity. And I find this picture to be interesting because, to me, this looks like the Southern Appalachians in the morning. You've got a river, you've got mountains, and you've got mist, right? All that is what you need to live. It's just water, sun, photosynthesis, habitat, and you've got biodiversity. Let's see, another question. What types of things can the average person do to help the rainforest? I will get into that at the end of the presentation, but to answer it very quickly, I would say, I always tell people money. If your dollar is what contributes to your opinion. Hey, I really shouldn't buy from this company, or I really shouldn't buy this much of this thing if I know it's going to go to a dump. It adds up. So that would be my quick answer, but I'll get into that towards the end. So threats to biodiversity. The first one I would say is poaching, right? So poaching is the illegal extraction or the over extraction of live animals from the jungle. You can also, or from any habitat for that matter, you can also poach plants. So poaching can be a problem. Most of it is just harvesting of animals for food, not because you need that, but because it tastes good, kind of thing. So we do a lot of education through Jungle Keepers to kind of discuss the pros and cons of that, and maybe kind of set up different farming operations that allow people to do that without potentially disturbing an ecosystem balance. So you got poaching. This is a picture I took in Cusco, which is 500 miles away from the jungle, but it's all animals from the jungle. You've got a black caiman skull, a red-tailed boa taxidermy, and a red brocket deer skull. And right behind that, you can see an anaconda jawbone. So that stuff makes its way pretty far away, and most of it goes to China. Another kind of semi-important issue, I would say, is pet trade. It's not affecting a tremendous amount of biodiversity, but in a world where since 1970, we've lost 50% of all living things on Earth, you have to start considering that even the pet trade can really do devastating things to a healthy population in the jungle, or any other ecosystem for that matter. The pet trade is also super cruel. I mean, you've probably seen really sad pictures of a bunch of parrots stuffed into bottles that got caught at an airport. This is pretty sad stuff. But, once again, conservation photography is aimed at bringing awareness to those types of issues. So that's why I took pictures like this. It's not necessarily viewing cruelty, but, a toucan drinking out of a portable water container doesn't exactly scream natural to me. And I think that's why, you got to be open to absorbing things around you and seeing where it fits in your narrative. Let's see here. Abby, do you have another question? How do you know that a fruit is an unknown fruit? Okay, so that goes into the living in the jungle aspect of things, right? So how do you know if fruits are safe to eat? What I do is I rely on the knowledge of indigenous people. We work with locals all the time, mostly to support what they do, learn from what they do and their historical knowledge, and then also know that you'll be okay because you're with them. So I usually ask my my guys down there if it's safe to eat, and sometimes they lie to me and then laugh at me when it doesn't work out for me. But always ask someone who knows, right? If you want to learn about mushrooms, find a mushroom expert and go on a hike with them. If you want to learn about salamanders, find a herpetologist, go on a hike with them. That's how you learn what's good and what's not good. No matter what book you read, you're not going to smell or touch the things that you want to learn about until you go out there and do it. So here's a huge one that I think everyone thinks about is logging. Logging is a huge reason why we're losing habitat and biodiversity. I think it's important to mention that a lot of people try to raise money for saving a species, but without a home, the species can't survive. And I think plant conservation, habitat conservation are the most important factors that we need to consider if we're trying to sustain all those heartbeats. So these are some examples of logging. You've got stacked lumber at a port. You've got a fallen ironwood tree on the bottom left-hand corner here. That's the only habitat that macaws nest in. And then you've got a truckload of ironwood trees, 600 years old each, which means the Spanish were probably in the country discovering South America when that tree was a sapling. So, and then you've got the people aspect of it. So it's something that I really aim to take pictures of the most because it's always there. Let's see, let me check questions. Is there anyone regulating the activity in the Amazon, poaching, logging, etc., or is it entirely up to outside forces to take action? I think that is a question that we're always asking ourselves when we feel helpless trying to do something about it, right? There are regulatory agencies in every ecosystem that are tasked at protecting an ecosystem, but some are more effective than others. I think that right now, the best way to support directly conservation is to travel to those regions with groups that are trusted and do conservation work. The presence of people in these ecosystems directly deters people from harvesting and extracting. The other thing is to create equitable jobs that make people, incentivize people to not do these things that they get paid the equivalent of $30 a day to do, right? If someone said they were going to pay me $30 to cut down a 600-year-old tree, I would say, I'm okay. I think I can hopefully find another job somewhere else. These people do not have that luxury. If you can see here, I really think it's important to understand that these people aren't bad people. They're people who are trying to make a living. And in the United States, we benefited very, very richly off of extraction, right? We cut down all of our trees 100 years ago, and they're all grown back, and we have our mountains that look like they're filled with broccoli heads, and it's great, and nobody has a problem with it. But we made a lot of money for a long time doing what they're doing right now. The only problem is they're at the bottom of the rung, and the people who they sell it to are making the money. So I really do think it's important to have an empathetic approach to doing conservation photography, especially when you're talking about people, because they are not bad people. I hope that answers your question. There is a lot of, in developing countries especially, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of bribery. I mean, we've bought land sometimes where you're just like, how did you get your hands on this? And, it's just sketchy. But it's so hard to see honesty when people are making money off of things. So it's a big challenge, and it's something that needs to be on the forefront of our minds for everything we buy. That's the best way to fix things, is to buy sustainable, to be sustainable. Population is only getting larger. And if we don't get more efficient in our farming practices and get more efficient in what we do and how we do it, we will have an Easter Island situation. We will have a Haiti situation. We'll have a Madagascar situation where resources were exploited, and now there's no trees, and there's no moisture in the soil, and there's no humus layer that's fertilizing things. It's pretty dire where we're at right now. So it's important for me to take pictures of the impact this type of activity has on locals, whether it's the people who are cutting the trees or the people whose land the trees are being cut on. There are forestry concessions, often harvest more than what they're delegated to harvest, or they will go on private land and harvest their own, someone else's wood. So this is the owner of some of the land, JJ. He's also one of my best friends down there, and he's someone I'd ask about fruit for sure, and ants and bugs and whatever else you think he can eat. So he just walked in on his property with all this wood drying on the sides, with a giant tree that got cut down, and that is the important aspect of a picture, right? If you don't have a context or something that kind of demonstrates where people are or how people are feeling about the things you care about, and saying, maybe people here also care about this too. They just need to be given other opportunities. That's where you hope your picture is 1,000 words, right? You got to do your best and hope people interpret it the way you were hoping they interpreted it. So another one, gold mining, right? Gold mining is accounting for, I think, 1/8 of Peru's GDP, and it's an illegal activity. Oh, I got a question. Are there any golden poison frogs in the Amazon? There are poison dart frogs in the Amazon. I think the golden species is a type of toad that can be found in Costa Rica, but I am not sure. There are, at least that I've seen in my life, I've seen 10 species of poison dart frogs in the jungle, but there's hundreds of them, and they're really fast, and they live in the canopy, and some of them never touch the ground, and makes me want to get a climbing harness. Let's just put it that way. So this is gold mining. It's not like the mining that you might see in mountains or anything. This is dredge mining, surface mining, erosion. They will erode a bank, collect all the sand, put mercury in it, bind the gold to mercury, burn it off, and then get, like, for this much land, you get maybe 10 ounces of gold, right? And there's no remediation for this, right? It is done. It's dead until 500 years from now, when we're not here or something, then it'll come back. But the worst part about it is it introduces mercury into the atmosphere, which then rains down on the entire ecosystem, which then bioaccumulates in the tiniest animals and then gets into each successive animal that eats it, until you have anacondas that are chock full of mercury because all they've eaten was mercury-laden animals. So it's something that we're worried about. People in Puerto Maldonado have higher mercury concentrations in their blood than anybody else in their cohort in the rest of the world because of illegal gold mining. And it really only makes money for a couple people. It's not a very equitable business model. So people are buying, like, it's so illegal, but it's still legal for people to sell it right on the road. So this sign just says, we buy gold at the best price in dollars, right? So you can just write that on the side of your business. And like that question before, who, are there any agencies that do these types of things? So sure there are, but if you can just make a sign like this and nobody's going to come knocking on your door and regulate you or kind of tell you you're not supposed to be doing that, then you're going to keep doing that. And you're going to feed that system, right? So when I say, when you spend your money, make sure you spend it right, like, make sure your gold isn't coming from illegal gold mines in Peru, right? Or make sure your diamonds aren't coming from diamond mines in Africa. It's not an ethics thing as much as it is, on top of that, a conservation thing. When your gold comes from there, you have lost 500 acres of jungle, no problem. So last one, slash and burn agriculture. This guy's a farmer. He's really proud of what he just did because he knows that he's going to be able to feed his family after he burned down that much land. This is a human thing. Conservation photography is all about trying to get the human perspective in a way that isn't villainizing people, but educating people. And it's in times like this where I get to talk to you about how slash and burn agriculture works in the Amazon, but it is not efficient. So we're working on doing some agroforestry initiatives to help people get more time out of their soil and amendments in their soil to allow them to keep using it rather than burning, growing for 2 years, burning the next plot next door, growing for 2 years, burning a plot next door, going back to the first plot and keep burning over and over again. I'm sure you guys saw the dust cloud come through last week that came from the Sahara. The interesting fact about that is it's actually the way the Amazon gets fertilized. So that dust cloud comes every year and fertilizes the entire jungle because the soil is so poor. And all of the minerals and calcium that came from an ancient seabed in an African desert is coming down and supporting all of that life in the jungle. But since this year was more drier than the years previous, we're experiencing more dust further north. So the trick is to do agroforestry to make sure that you can capitalize on that fertilizer. Here's another example of some slash and burn. And it's important to mention, like in slash and burn, you've got all of these animals in this brush that have no idea what's going on. There's tortoises trying to run away, snakes. And if you go behind the fire, you will find animals that have just didn't know what to do and perished, right? So you're knocking out a huge chunk of biodiversity every time that happens as well, and at a rate that, it's like a volcano erupting every day, which, the earth can handle a volcano eruption every 1,000 years, right? But it can't handle this. It can't handle this. But okay, all that sad stuff, like this is the biodiversity I'm talking about, right? This place has more life, more heartbeats than anywhere else on Earth, right? You've got monkeys, snakes, insects, things that we don't even know what it is, but we just take pictures of it because after you're done doing the photojournalistic aspect of conservation photography, there is an aspect of science that is worthy of mention, right? You being down there, you going to these places and pushing it with whatever equipment you have also opens up your opportunity to find new species and things that nobody's seen before, or there's been one picture of in 1985 that's 5 megapixels and you get to have your 30 megapixel camera and you take a real documented piece that people can refer back to. So, it's finding your niche, just like in an ecosystem. You just got to find out where you can be useful and capitalize on those uses. I think I saw another question. A couple questions. Do you ever feel nervous or in danger when doing conservation photography? The only times I truly feel like I'm in danger is when I'm around people. Some people don't really expect a random foreigner to go down somewhere and do things. So for example, at a gold mining operation, my friend and I pretended we were we were scouting for a dirt bike show that we wanted to do, right? And there's all these big mounds that come from gold mining sites. And we acted like we were producers and we got to like the final boss in the game, right? Where we were ready to take pictures and get what we needed about, the bad effects of gold mining. And a guy pulls a gun out on us and says, get the hell out of here. There is danger involved in certain types of photography, but I think that's when you have to rely on your personality and your social skills and do the best you can, be respectful of the culture of the people that you work with. Not everyone is going to take a New Jersey guy coming up to you and saying, hey, let me take pictures. Like sometimes you got to sit, have a couple drinks, talk, show that you have common ground with the person. And then they go, look, I'm doing this because I have to do it, because I have 4 kids at home. Like, if you want to take pictures, fine, do that. Like, through relationships like that, we've actually turned gold miners into tour operators. And they've stopped gold mining and they've started their own tours, and we do tours for them with Tim and do expeditions. So it's pretty cool. You just got to be patient and know when to stop. So let's see here. Another question. Do you know how to get involved with ecotourism to improve this type of lifestyle? Are there ways outside of conservation photography to maybe reverse them? So this is where I plug my company, Tim and Do Expeditions. We do these trips all the time. Our primary goal is to make sure that people who work with us came from professions like logging, mining, poaching, and put them in a tourism setting. So loggers know a lot about the forest. They don't just know how to cut down trees. They know all the plants and the animals, and they know all the indigenous words for things. They have awesome ghost stories. They tell you crazy uncontacted tribe stories. And I think that it really helps our tourists gain a tremendous amount of authentic, original insight on what it's like to live there, and not just live there now, but live there 20 years ago when they were kids. So we do that. I will, if you don't mind, Abby, could you just put in our website, timanduajungle.com? Yeah, so we do trips. We have sustainable chefs. We do study abroads. That's how we do it. And then a portion of our proceeds goes into our nonprofit Jungle Keepers, which supports a ranger program in Peru, one of the first of its kind. And we're just working as we go and winging it and making sure that we can keep contiguous land and habitat. I think there was another question. What's the most difficult skill you need to go on these trips and do this type of work? So I am a firm believer in the fact that it takes you 10,000 hours to get truly good at something. And I think I was lucky enough to have a camera in my hand when I was 9 years old, and I didn't know I was practicing, but I was. And I mean, number one, if you want to be a photographer, you got to take pictures. I don't care if they're good pictures or bad pictures. The more pictures you take, the more you'll have your own style. And if you think they're good, right? Really and truly, it's hard to get a picture like the ones I started off with that just speak for themselves. They just say what they need to say. And I personally think that out of every 1,000 pictures I take, I maybe have 2 that speak for themselves every time. So just keep taking pictures, and then working in the field is rough. It's rough on your body. There's bugs. You're trying to take a landscape and there's flies all over your face. Abby knows what I'm talking about. It can be really tough. And the first time I went to the jungle, I said, I want to go home. I want to go home. And I came home and I said, oh my God, it was so fun there. I need to toughen up. And that's what I did. I just kept going and torturing myself until I wasn't distracted by the jungle and I was focused on my work. And that is how you get things done. So that's the best answer to that question I can give you. Be okay with a little bit of torture. So here's some other pictures. Like I said, on the top left, you see a spider fence, right? It was a species that was discovered like 3 years ago and then rediscovered by Phil Torres like 2 years ago. That is a spider that lives there, and it's about the size of your thumb. And I just walked into it, and I know for a fact there's probably less than 20 images of that, right? So it's contributing to that scientific knowledge, right? You've got juvenile emerald tree boa. Then you've got Roy, our chef, who is awesome and collects all these different jungle fruits, right? And then, it would be one thing to take a picture of the fruits just like that without Roy in it, but I think that Roy's part of the story too. His hands are the ones that make this food, and he knows all this stuff about all these things you can get out of the jungle. And look how colorful. So, and then you've got macaws that live in ironwood trees, like I talked about, and they mate for life. They have the IQ of a 5-year-old. If anyone has a 5-year-old or has had a 5-year-old, they are really smart. And to know that about them, and to know that they don't have homes after ironwood trees are cut down is something that I can't sleep at night over. So, you know, bringing that to you is one of the joys of my life. Even though it's bad information, it's information. A trick of the trade: people love baby animals. If you see a WWF commercial, you will always see a baby animal, because people want to donate to babies. They want to know that the cute things are living, right? And if you can get the cute thing to live, then the habitat is protected. I would just love to start shifting our focus towards understanding that the habitat is what must be protected. It's an understanding of the ecosystem that is required to actually really care. So cuteness aside, it's all about habitat. And then one of the last things I wanted to say: people live here. It's an important thing to document that. I've said that a couple times. These are different people in different places doing work, right? So you've got a Brazil nut processor at a Brazil nut drying oven, and then you have the woman who's cracking the Brazil nuts. Just to let you guys know, Brazil nuts are the only nut that you can buy that supports primary rainforest, because Brazil nuts do not fruit without an intact ecosystem with multiple animals contributing to the pollination, the germination, and all of those fun things. Let's see here. So conservation in our backyard. Let me double check questions here. Is it possible to do direct donations to paying these workers to lead tourists to buy their loyalty away from the work they're currently in? So that's a really good question. I think the solution to conservation is always going to be a multifaceted approach. You're going to have researchers doing analysis. You're going to have free market enterprise doing their tourism. You're going to have nonprofits doing their work. You're going to have photographers taking pictures. Our approach with what we do is that we get these people from other industries that are harmful, and we pay them more for what they do. If they work for us for a longer amount of time, we help their kids go to school and learn English, because you know, as they say, if you can influence a child to have an opinion on something, or to care about something, they will bring that home and they will talk to their parents. They will, right? And in a scenario where these children are in a town that has only profited from extraction, it's amazing to be able to educate these kids, provide them with opportunities, so that when they're in a classroom of 100 people, they're brave enough to raise their hand and say, you know, my family works with ecotourism. My dad used to be a logger. The reason I'm sitting here is because of ecotourism. And, you know, my dad needed help because his leg was broken, and they helped him. You know, if you're not focused on making money and you're more focused on getting the job done, you can actually do a lot of good in this world. And somehow you get a little bit of one and then the satisfaction of the other, which is helping people, protecting biodiversity. And the way we do it is through Tamandua expeditions. But if you want to donate directly to what we do on the nonprofit side of things, you can go to junglekeepers.com and donate directly to what we do down there. So that would be how I'd answer that question. Appreciate that also, by the way. What advice would you give to kids who think the world is going to end from climate change, and how do we empower them instead of scaring them? I deal with this every single day. It's hard not to have a fatalistic mentality, but I would say that we get really, and this is just me speaking here, we get really caught up on the trending topic of the time, and it's really important to stay woke. You know, it's really important to understand that the world is far more complicated than we're even willing to be woke over, right? But if you care about climate change, then you should dedicate that energy to climate change, right? If you want to feel like you're part of the solution, then you have to be part of the solution, right? And it's going to take many, many people doing many, many things, some huge and some small, to make a difference in this world. But fatalism is not where we need to be right now. And really and truly, it's not really where we ever want to be. The world is going to end if you let it. And as someone who's seen some pretty sad things, if I'm holding on, like, you guys got to hold on too, because and it's not about preaching your beliefs all the time about how climate change is happening. It's about finding one person every 5 years that you think you can influence and influence them, right? If you try to influence every single person to believe what you believe, you're going to feel bad. You're going to feel terrible. But if you accept that a couple people in your life will be influenced by your thoughts, and be educated on those thoughts, right? Read sourced material. Don't read a headline in an article and then share it, right? You need to be informed, right? And I was telling someone the other day, nobody's asking me about what's going on in the world with COVID or anything, but I'm always asked about, hey, I have a plant in my backyard. What do I do with it, right? Or is this native? Is this non-native? And though being that person was an earned thing, right? Nobody's going to ask me about how to fix their car, right? But they do trust what I have to say about conservation, or protecting biodiversity and native habitats, right? So you just got to pick something, establish yourself as knowledgeable about that, and then go from there. That is a great question. I'm glad you forced me to answer it, because it's important. So one of the things that I want to also tie into that question perhaps is how you can do this at home, right? The jungle is this exotic place and there's appeal to it, but literally at home, once again, most biodiverse place, at least on the East Coast, perhaps in the entire United States, Southern Appalachians. So I've gone out with researchers to do darter studies just to help them photograph, help researchers have better quality material, and maybe translate what they're trying to say to the general public. Like, we have darters in our streams that look like they're from Mozambique. Like, they're just tropical. They look amazing. Farming practices in our backyard. There are people who do sustainable farming practices. And it's important to, perhaps enter a demographic of people that aren't necessarily interfacing with a lot of people all the time. Most of the farmers I know are interfacing with farmers, right? So coming in, helping them document things, and then having discourse is great. But this mountain that I took a picture of, if it's a gravel bed one day, like, at least there's a picture of it. People need to know that time changes, and it changes a lot of things. And if you don't have a way to evaluate how it was before, then you have no concept of what it is now. So I encourage everybody, if you're ever interested in doing conservation photography, go outside, find a story, and take pictures. And you'll find over years that you'll look at your first couple years of pictures and you'll go, oh God, I can't believe I was allowed to take pictures. But that practice leads to something. So if you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram at Mohsin Kazmi Takes Pictures. My website's mohsinkazmi.com. And then, like I said, tamanduajungle.com if you want to go on trips with us or learn about what we do. Our website is currently being worked on because we're capitalizing on COVID time. And we have junglekeepers.com if you're looking at helping us out in the jungle. Any questions you might have, you let me know. I'm coming off screen share right now. One sec. I think you talking?
I am now.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So I think you answered all the final questions that rolled in. If I get any more, I can send them to you. And sometimes we have speakers that will just email answers to questions that didn't. Oh, sorry. But yeah, so I see one just came in, but I don't know what it says yet. It says, what kinds of W have you seen? But I think a word got chopped off.
We'll wait on it.
Yeah, we'll wait on it.
W,
but if you have
W.
do you have any favorite stories of the Amazon that you'd like to share? We have just a few minutes left and I want to use up all my time.
So let's see here. I think, when I first started, I had these like crescendos of punctuated stories, right? And then I'm turning 30 on Sunday, right? And the only thing I know that I've done since I graduated college was this, right? Everything I did to make sure it was to make sure I could go to Peru and do what I love to do. So the stories have kind of melded together, and to me, it's like, I love my pictures, but to me, they're journal entries, right? When I look at my pictures, I think about how I felt, what was biting me, like how deep I was in water or whatever it was to get the thing you see on the other side of the lens. And generally, I just feel like each experience has made me better prepared for life when I come home. I find myself saying, it's not that bad, a lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, saying it's not that bad makes me a lot happier of a person. And in many ways, photography for me has been getting out of my comfort zone, because I don't like taking pictures of people, because I don't want them to be annoyed by me or whatever it might be. But then I do it and I come back and I say, I'm so thankful that I felt that uncomfortable at that moment, because now I have this. But yeah, I mean, gold mining, pretending you're a film crew, staging a location and getting guns pointed at you, to like jumping on 200-pound snakes and dragging them around and doing research. It's I'm pretty satisfied so far.
So we did have two more questions come in. So the first one, where the word was cut off, they were wondering about what wild cats you see. And then I'll ask the second one after you.
Yeah, so the rainforest is home to a ton of wild cats. You've got jaguars, pumas, ocelots, margays, jaguarundis. All of those are cats that you see in the jungle. They're pretty elusive. They're very, very cryptic, especially the jaguars. They will follow you through the forest without you even knowing. You turn around and they're gone, But I would be very fearful, for example, to work in like the Indian jungle where there's elephants, right? Cats are afraid of us. They've been learned. It's been learned. An elephant is like, what are you doing here? And then they chase you, right? That is something that would be my first story if I had worked there. Hopefully someday soon.
And then the second question that came in was, do you have any thoughts on the overarching issue of industry versus conservation?
Industry versus conservation, right? So that could go in multiple ways, but I'm going to assume that means perhaps industries focusing on conservation and how equitable that might be. So I'll answer it in that lens and clarify if not. But industry tends to work. You need industry to sustain the population we have. In many ways, industry is effective at what they do and pretty efficient at what they do, but it's perhaps the method at which they do it that we're concerned about as conservationists, right? As we grow in population, whether we like it or not, we're going to need to be more effective. We're going to need to be more sustainable. And holding industry accountable to perhaps changing their methods of manufacturing, of who they pay and how much they pay them, all of these types of things, right? You could be the most sustainable industry on earth, but if you pay your lower level employees very little, they're going to go in the forest and they're going to shoot things and eat them, or they're going to cut down trees supplementally to make the income that they need to raise a family. So it's pretty cliche, but if they don't spread the wealth, we're going to have more of these problems where we see styrofoam thrown into rivers because that's the cheapest, right? We're gonna have problems with deforestation, and I'm sure people have mentioned this in your other talks. Pandemics happen because we lose the insulative barrier of forests. When you remove the forest, the animals that are vectors for these diseases will go and bring them to us. That is a fact. Just like mangroves protect us from tsunamis and hurricanes on barrier islands, forests insulate us from viruses and pandemics. It's just something we're going to have to accept. There's no real ifs, ands, or buts on that one. So the more habitat we have, the more we sustain the vectors and the cures for these types of diseases. So if someone said there's a library in your backyard and you don't know how to read the books yet in that library, but you will if you wait, I would say keep it, because I want to learn how to read them. And that's how I view conservation and forest, protecting habitat.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I'm glad that you brought up, I guess, so you sort of even brought the virus into this issue, because it touches every other part of our lives without us even knowing. So that was really awesome. And do you have any knowledge of maybe countries or policies that are in place currently around the world that are maybe good examples that we as the United States should follow, or somewhere like Peru should follow? Or what do you see as like a potential solution?
So a good management program that I've seen was in Kruger National Park. It's called the SMART program. It's a ranger program where they have cell phone infrastructure. Africa benefits from cell phone infrastructure like no other country I've ever seen. And they use it for reporting. They use it for geotagging different things. And on top of that, they train their guards to be like soldiers, right? And you have to determine the culture, right? Peru's not as violent and gun laden as perhaps parts of Africa are. And the incentives for a rhino horn are far more than perhaps a jaguar pelt. So, the SMART program really works. I think the bigger the nonprofit, the more money they have, but the less personal and directly effective I feel like they become. But they have their place. The way I look at it is society, conservation, whatever it might be, has a multifaceted approach. If you're doing what you're doing, hopefully there's someone else doing what they're doing, right? I don't want to check camera trap studies all day and say, the head's down, the head's up, the predator's here, the predator's there. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do spreadsheets. I don't want to, right? But I do want to do venture capital investments in local people who want to start a sustainable restaurant in the jungle, right? Not in the jungle, but in the city next to the jungle, right? But there are people who do the camera trap studies, and I'm very thankful for them. So taking an approach, if you're gung-ho and you have the passion and you're willing to hear no a bunch of times, do it yourself. Do it yourself. You'll find people who are also doing it themselves. Find how you can help those people. A lot of nonprofits are out for getting their attention, getting their, like, we did this, we're the first to do this. And I think as our generation comes up, I think it's our responsibility, back to not having a fatalistic mentality. It's our responsibility to be more cohesive and helpful and productive. This isn't Game of Thrones. This is the future of biodiversity at stake, right? It's not about chess. It's about having the chess game in mind, but making sure that all of the pieces that are working in conservation are on one side of the board, right? Don't separate yourself or differentiate yourself because of what you study and what someone else studies, who you are and where the other person's from, how you approach conservation. It's not worth it. We're all fighting the same thing here. So don't give up. Just do. Yeah,
so diverse and many different solutions for biodiversity and diverse problems. And then we will end on a more fun question. What is the largest snake you've ever photographed?
I would say the largest snake I've ever photographed was an 18-foot anaconda that was 244 pounds that I have a picture of. It's probably the worst way to show you, but I will show it to you on my phone. It was the largest anaconda ever caught in the last 50 years. And it was part of our mercury study, actually. So here we go. Can you kind of see that?
Yeah.
How big that thing is? Yeah, it was pretty massive. And
I saw Paul and JJ in there with you.
Yeah, the dream team was all there.
Yeah, right? Awesome.
Yeah. But I really do appreciate everyone's time, and I hope you guys learned something from this. If you need anything or want to talk more or ask more questions, find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook, find me on my website. I really
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'll post all the links to our website and our Facebook page. So if you guys are interested in anything that Mohsin was talking about today or visiting some of his sites, you will have access to that. And if there are any additional questions, you can just send them into myself or the museum, and we will contact Mohsin and chase him down for the answers. So thank you so much, Mohsin. We really appreciate your time.
Thank
Keep doing what you're doing.
Right back at you.
All right. Talk soon. Bye.
See ya. Thank you.